In today's weekly update, let's review the past 10 months or so. Back in March of last year, we started to experience this COVID pandemic. And man, that sent our church through a lot of adaptation. We had to shut down services for a while. We met in the parking lot for a while. I started doing daily updates instead of weekly updates just to try to help us stay abreast of all the things that were going on and think about them through a Christian lens. Friends, here's where I think we find ourselves at the beginning of 2021, and a shift I want to encourage you to make. I think we're at the place in our lives where COVID can now be a thing that's in the background instead of in the foreground. What I mean by that is none of us really know, like, when will things go back to normal? Like, when can we sort of go back to not really worrying about this stuff, if that is ever the case? And I don't know the answer to that. And none of us quite know how's all the vaccine rollout's going to work, and at what point will things kind of feel like they can shift again. But here's what I think we can all embrace, is that 10 months ago, 9 months ago, 8 months ago, this was a very foreground reality in our lives. It shaped everything. And I feel like where we're at now is that most of us are treating it more as a background reality, meaning we know it's there, it hasn't gone away, there's things we need to do differently because of the pandemic, but also it's not like front and center in the thing that takes up all of our energy and our time and our attention. And I think that's good. And so what I want to encourage you toward is just to ask the question, hey, as we sort of set this in the background, what are the implications of that and the effects of that? As you know, I'm hopeful that if nothing changes, we'll get to have Easter this year, which we didn't get to last year. We want to slowly reopen Coram Deo Kids in a greater way, and we'd like that to happen around Easter. And so there's some things as we look into that we're saying we're going to sort of move slowly and patiently toward some things that feel a little more normal here at Coram Deo. Now, there's many more of you that have been coming back to church, and the reality is there's many people within our church that have had COVID and recovered. And so there's just a lot of us who are on the other side of that, and that does sort of bring with it a different lens. And so, look, I don't know what all is going to happen in the world of public health. I don't know what all is happening in the culture, but what I think we can embrace is that as God's people and as people of hope, and as people who are called to live with a positive and hopeful view of the future because of the new heavens and new earth, we can embrace this as just a background reality of our lives now, and sort of instead of treating it as the thing that's front and center and creates all kinds of anxiety and concern for us, treat it as something that is still there, but we got to kind of learn how to live with it. And so I hope that perspective gives you a sense of how to move into 2021. As I said a few updates ago, man, we still don't have a ton of stuff on the calendar. We're still not saying, hey, here's all the stuff we're going to do as a church. But we are saying, man, we want to move back toward as much sort of normal expectation as we can, understanding that until we hear otherwise, we still have to do our services a certain way, and it still limits our space and our capacity, and there's still things that just are affected. But as much as possible, embracing all that, we want to be normal. And I'm excited about the ways the Spirit of God has been at work the past few Sundays in our church. It's been a fun series to preach. Next Sunday, we're going to close this series on Good News for the Weary out with a sermon on spiritual warfare from Ephesians 6. And so I want to encourage you to read that passage, Ephesians 6, 10 through 20, this week as we prepare to think about what it means to experience God's good news in our spiritual weariness. And then in February, we're going to study the book of Ruth together, which I'm really excited about. And so more on that next week. Until then, have a great week, and I'll see you next Sunday.